The permanent suspension of Donald Trump from Twitter was clearly a kind of cultural event. It must have actually been traumatic for Trump. Why? Because he lived on Twitter. I mean, it was part of his identity. It was the way he disclosed his personality to America. And of course, it was his way of getting around the media. That's what made his Twitter so powerful. I actually think Trump was one of the funniest and most effective tweeters of all time. When people would say to me, "Oh, Dinesh, please find a way to take away his Twitter." These congressmen would say this to me. And I'd be like, take away his Twitter and do what? Give it to you? What would you do with it? You wouldn't have the slightest idea. So Trump, I'm sure, took this as a heavy blow. Now, who suspended Trump on Twitter? You might think the answer is, well, we all know it's Jack Dorsey. But in reality, the true architect of this was apparently a woman named Vijaya Gadde, an Indian woman, a descendant, the child of Indian parents who moved to America in the 1970s, early 80s. A woman who went to Cornell and New York University Law School and then went off to Silicon Valley. Now, Vijaya Gadde is probably part of the great Indian diaspora. These are very conservative Indian families that have come to America with conservative values. If you look at the way they behave, it's like to the right of Pat Robertson. So then you ask, how do these people become dyed-in-the-wool leftists? How do they absorb an ideology that would seem so alien to the way they were raised and to the way that what they believe and what they think? I think the answer to this question is very simple. What happens to these Asian Americans who go to elite schools and plant themselves in progressive cities like San Francisco or Silicon Valley is they assimilate to progressive culture. In other words, they want to become American, and becoming American for them means assimilating to the culture of Yale or the culture of Cornell or the culture of San Francisco. Now, when they do this, they have to become artificial people, and what I mean by that is they have to come up with made-up stories about all the great gender discrimination that they suffered and how they're victims of racism from start to finish. And many of these stories are either laid on thick, exaggerated, or made up out of whole cloth. I was watching an interview that Vijaya Gadde gave back at her alma mater, NYU Law School, and it contains this remarkable anecdote about her father having to have a meeting with a leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Watch.
My parents and I immigrated to this country in the 70s. I grew up in a small town in Texas on the Gulf Coast, near the border of Louisiana. It was a very challenging location for an immigrant family. And, you know, my parents went through quite a bit to be a part of that community. I've told this story before. I try not to get emotional, but it's a very hard story. Like, you know, my dad had a master's degree, but he couldn't find work. So he took a job at the time selling insurance door to door and collecting premiums door to door. And he wasn't even allowed to have that job until he went to the local leader of the KKK and asked permission, because his company and his boss feared for his safety as a person of color, walking around in white communities and knocking on doors. And, you know, my dad tells this story, but it was a very pragmatic, practical decision for him to have to do that. Right. He had no choice. He had to feed his family.
Now, I call bullshit on this one. My reaction is that this is not, in fact, true. I can't believe it. It makes no sense to me. Okay, Vijaya Gadde, if you want to keep telling this story, here's what I suggest. Give me the name of your father, if he's still around. Give me the name of this so-called KKK leader that your father had this session with to get his endorsement. And I will verify the story and give the result, whatever it is, here on this show. The reason I don't believe it is when I hear stories about things that rub me the wrong way, I try to create a mental picture of what must have happened. And so here is my imaginative rendition of the meeting of Vijaya Gadde's father and the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Ding dong. Who the hell are you? I am Mr. Gotti. What are you doing here? I am here to seek your endorsement. Are you some kind of Italian? No, I am actually Indian. What tribe? No. I am Asian Indian. I am from India. Do you know what we do with people like you? I have heard some very troubling stories. Well, what the hell do you want? I would like to seek your endorsement. For what? Well, I would like to sell insurance in this community, and I am informed that your endorsement will enable me to do that unimpeded. I don't know what the hell you just said, but listen, buddy, you go do it. Let me just give you one piece of advice. Wear a Confederate hat. Oh, that will be absolutely no problem. I like hats. Well, get the hell out of here. And then, when Mr. Gotti leaves, a voice from the back room to the Ku Klux Klan leader. Hey, Jasper, who was that out there? Mildred, you won't believe what the tide just brought in. Well, that's my skit. And as you can see, it's a little far-fetched.